So this is the story of William Tell. Now, William Tell is a Swiss folk hero. Um, he's a little bit better documented than Robin Hood, but there's a sort of mythos about him that's not entirely firm. Anyway, he is a national hero of Switzerland, and he lived in a place called Altdorf, which in German means old village. So he lives in the old village or around the old village. At this time, 1307, Switzerland was ruled by Austria. The Austria Hungarian Empire was this massive empire that was part of the remains of the Holy Roman Empire. It was like the largest chunk of the remnants of the Holy Roman Empire. So Austria was ruling over Switzerland, and Switzerland was starting to organize as a democracy, where you had each of these little cantons, which is like a county or almost a state. And they were all getting together, and they're like, we're going to elect local leaders, and then we're going to join together, and we'll all fight together, and our local leaders who we choose will guide the progress, and then we'll just kick everybody out. And Switzerland's a great place to kick everybody out of because it's all mountains. Well, mostly mountains. It's mountains and valleys. But the thing is there's a lot of mountains. And if someone's up in a mountain throwing stones down at you, there's not much you can do. And because it's a mountain, there's a lot of stones. So anyway, William Tell was a hunter, a marksman, a boatman. He was just an all around rugged, rough kind of guy. Could just do about anything. And he was going into town, and he was going into town with his son. And the local Austrian ruler, so this is the governor who was put in place by the emperor. So the emperor assigned this guy to watch over Altdorf in the vicinity. And he was the governor. And what he did was he took his hat and he put it up on top of this tree. And the tree was sort of a meeting place. So back then, what they had was they had these big trees that served as a community center. So if there was going to be any announcements, they happened at the tree. If there was going to be any if there was going to be any announcements, they were held at the tree. If there was going to be a hanging, they would be done at the tree. If there was any of these things, it would be done at the tree. And so the governor, took his hat and he put it up on top, and he said, everyone has to bow down to it. Anyone who comes into town would have to bow down to it. Now, because William Tell was a woodsman and William Tell was uber competent, he was like, no, I am not going to bow down to this guy's hat. I am a free man. So Albert Gessler, the governor, was like, look, you got to bow down to the hat. You got to show respect to me. If you don't show respect to me, you don't show respect to the emperor. If you don't show respect to the emperor, I'm going to start killing people. William Tell was like, no, I'm not going to bow down to the hat. So Gessler had Tell seized, tied up, had his son seized and tied up. And he had heard stories about William Tell being this fabulous archer with a crossbow, much like Robin Hood. That he was this fabulous archer with a crossbow. Now, a crossbow is kind of like a stepped up version of a bow. A bow, long stick, bent string, you pull it back. As you pull it back, the bow bends, and as the bow bends, it acts like a spring. And so when the bow straightens up, because it's wood and wants to go back to its original shape, as it straightens up, it pulls the string and pushes the arrow. Now, a crossbow works on the same principle, except the bow is heavier, quite often made of like steel, and it's pulled back with a lot more force, and there's a catch. So if I take the 100-pound bow, which was the standard hunting weight, standard war weight of a bow, which means it takes 100 pounds of force to pull back the bow, then I have to hold that 100 pounds until I'm ready to let go of the arrow, and that gets really tiring. With a crossbow, I take the 150 pounds, I go, use my foot, brace it, and it catches. And once it catches, I just hold it. And I push a little lever down at the bottom, and the little lever down at the bottom releases the hook, and then the bow straightens up and the arrow flies straight. So crossbows have some advantages over longbows, in terms that you can get a lot more power. And they tend to have flatter arc because you have more power, and a flatter arc makes it easier to use. So anyway, William Tell, master crossbowman. And the governor, Gessler, had heard this. He's like, okay, here's the deal. I'll let you live. But you got to take one of those quarrels, one of those bolts. Crossbows shoot, instead of arrows, they shoot something called a quarrel or a bolt. You take one of those bolts, and I'm going to set your son up against the tree. I'm going to put an apple on his head. If you hit the apple, I'll let you both go free. And William Tell was like, oh, well, this is a chance to save my son. Chance to maybe save myself. More to save his son, because they were both going to be executed. So he's like, okay. Pulls out the bolt. Stretches the crossbow. Puts it in place. Shoots. Hits the arrow. Son is saved.
Hits the arrow?
Sorry. Hits the apple. The bolt hits the apple. Son is saved. William Tell is saved. And the governor's like, hey, why did you get out 2 bolts? William Tell was like, well, if I killed my son, you were going to get the next one. And the governor was like, nah. Bind him up. And William Tell was like, wait a minute, you said you wouldn't kill me. It's like, I'm not going to kill you. I'm just going to put you in a hole. I'm going to put you in a hole someplace, and you are going to just sit there and wait and die of old age in this hole. William Tell's like, oh. So they take William Tell. His son goes free. And they take William Tell. They put him on a boat, and they start taking him. And the wind picks up, and the waves, and a storm. And so there's this storm out on the lake, and the men with the tillers are like, we don't know what we're doing. We don't know this lake. We don't know where the rocks are. William Tell's like, hey, I know where the rocks are. I can steer the boat. Just untie my hands, I can steer the boat. I can get us all to safety. Otherwise, we're going to wreck and all drown. And the governor was like, okay, yeah. We'll uncuff him. So they unchain him. He starts running the tiller. Things are looking good. And then all of a sudden, pulls the tiller over right into the rocks, and the boat sinks. And William Tell hops out and starts swimming and gets away. Then ends up dying of old age almost 50 years later. So this was in 1307. He died in 1354, which is, considering that, he was probably in his 20s or 30s when it took place, that means he was up in his 80s. So that's a great age to live to. So that is the story of William Tell, sort of national Swiss hero. And much like Robin Hood, and it's I am a good hunter, I am a good hunter, I am a good fighter, I refuse to accept the wrongful authority. And so he was a rebel, and that is part of the reason why he's a big national hero in Switzerland.